honor to be here with you today. I feel very underdressed. I have to admit, my partner, Aaron, my significant other, left before me this morning for work, and so when that happens, either I don't match or I underdress for the occasion, so it happened. But I should have known. I should have known I was coming to a law school. People were going to be wearing suits and ties, and even Creighton's in a tie. The only time I ever see Creighton ties during a legislative session. But I've had to wear a suit the last 3 days. And as a liberal-leaning Democrat, that's tough. That's tough. So I had to take the opportunity to dress down a little bit. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you. And a lot of what I'm going to say is hopefully not too repetitive, but it's going to kind of bring together some of what was already spoken to, particularly the last two speakers. I was asked to address the politics of the legislation. And we were joking that there really wasn't much politics going on. But in reality, there was politics from the very beginning. And Heather spoke to you about the initial draft that she put together, and this was in 2006. And I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know what I was reading. I was one of those that was pulled in by the heartstrings. I still vividly remember that paper, particularly that first comparison of the two individuals, the parolee and the one gentleman that was let out of prison because of the questions of whether he was innocent. And that brought me to the table. So I didn't know what I was looking at legally. I didn't know what I was looking at in terms of drafting language. And when I turned over that model legislation to our drafting attorneys, I learned a very valuable lesson. That sometimes when you think you're getting a head start, you're actually setting yourself back a little bit. That model legislation was based on concepts, based on a concept, what may fit in other states, but based on some of the language within our own statutory codes. There was some language questions. It became a hard bill to draft initially, and then when we finally got the bill out, all of a sudden I had the chair of the Board of Pardons and Parole, and I had Creighton come up to me and say, "Look, we're going to have to oppose this." And I'm thinking, oh boy, that's the last thing I want. There's politics lesson number one: make sure you have the right allies with you, and make sure that only Guillermo Rosica opposes what you do. Thought it was very positive. We just want to make sure you have the right support. And we knew going in that prosecutors would be critical, that prosecutors would be key. And here they were coming to me and telling me that they opposed this legislation. But it was very, very important to realize that why they were opposing the legislation had nothing to do with the concept. It had only to do with the language of the bill. And that the way it came together, and the way that it was drafted, there were some questions. The language was loose. And so were we really going to accomplish what we were after? And so really the politics started from the beginning in that drafting process, and it became very apparent that we needed to spend the time over an interim period to work out and make sure that we were drafting some tight statutory language. It was characterized that this committee that we brought together was kind of a kumbaya, and in many ways, and in most times it really was. But oftentimes, from my perception, it kind of felt we were in court sometimes. Okay, it really does, and that was important, and it was good that it was like that, and because through that process, okay, and it wasn't always the prosecutorial side arguing the prosecutorial side and the defense, it was something that they would argue for the other side. But by having the opposing viewpoints, or what we would oftentimes think as opposing sides, or seemingly opposing sides coming together, what we were doing is we were bringing that whole picture in from the very beginning. That was extremely important because we were asking every question imaginable. Now imagine drafting legislation such as this with just one side in the room. You're creating a situation where you have to think beyond your own experience, your own expertise, and guess what the other side may think. And trust me, we did some of that when it came to legislators, but I have no idea what they think. But so having those individuals seemingly opposing sides in the room was essential to drafting some very good and hopefully some of the best that we have in the country legislation. You know, as I took off my watch, you always make sure when you ask a politician to speak that they're paying very close attention to the time, because boy, can they talk. So I want to be very respectful of the time, and hopefully have the time to get to some questions before we end. There's also political strategy you have to think about. Now, let me tell you something. I've been up there 7 years now, but an individual such as Creighton dwarfs me in experience in working with legislators and can speak to political strategy as well as I can in any capacity. But I need to let you know that even to the title of the legislation, we were thinking strategically. Obviously, when we talk a lot about it, you hear the word compensation. But as Creighton said, we were looking at a no-fault-based approach. We're not looking at trying to prove that someone did something wrong in order to have the assistance. And so in the bill, we said we have to avoid that word compensation, because compensation comes across like we're implying someone did something maliciously or whatever by fault, by design, by desire. And so even the name of the bill, by focusing on the word assistance and innocent assistance, was very calculated, very strategically motivated. Our allies. When I knew that when Creighton came to me, and the chair of the Board of Pardons and Parole came to me that first year and said we had to oppose it, I knew that we weren't prepared for that. That we weren't prepared to argue against prosecutors, because all they would have to say is, look, there's a chance that innocent people or guilty individuals are going to be let out of this. And it would have been done. It would have been over. And that's not obviously what we were after. But it would have been that simple. And so it was very important that we all walked away from that table, in that committee room, which we spent a lot of time in, being comfortable with that language. And that's where I say sometimes it felt like court, because there were not arguments, but there were, dialogue back and forth. Okay, but what if this? Well, you have this word, and what if it's interpreted this way? And that's why I think we could all walk away, no matter where we were coming from, feeling extremely comfortable with the language that was the end result. Along with what Creighton said, with the prosecutors, we had to make sure other allies were online with us, that we had the victims community, and that organizations that represent the victims supported this legislation. Now, it's interesting, because I once spoke to about something completely different. I was speaking to a director of a State Department, and this bill came up. He said, "Yeah, I was really surprised that you would run this legislation, because you seem so empathetic toward victims." I'm like, what that tells you right away is that even in some degrees, that those that were wrongfully convicted are initially perceived as victims of the system. So with that realization, it became very important, and particularly because of the way that we developed the funding source and the funding stream that we had to support, because it ties into criminal victim reparations, that we have to support the victims community. Very key, very strategic, very important. You want to make sure that you have the right names, and I'm not just talking about legislators, but the right names of organizations that are stamped on that legislation before you move forward. Particularly something like this, which can be easily derailed. The notion of fiscal responsibility. Let me just emphasize this a little bit, and Heather spoke about it. We're in a conservative state. I hope you realize that by now. Okay? Fiscal responsibility is a value. It's something that's extremely valued up at the legislature. Okay? At the legislature. And when we could make that argument that this was a fiscally responsible thing to do because we're providing a consistent amount, and when we could show some of the awards that were out there where states did not have a policy, it helped us obviously make that argument. Now just think about it. Okay? In these states where an individual received $15 million, what you do is you bring that individual to the Capitol, they tell their extremely compelling story, and special legislation was run to compensate them. And then you're making a decision based on emotion, based on that one person's situation, okay? And you're not going to do the most fiscally responsible thing, maybe. And so being able to make that argument was critical. Let me say, and then I'll take a seat, and two more things real quickly. The opposition. My friends over here seem to have a better understanding of the opposition because I still don't understand the opposition. There's some irony there for me. One, and you heard the numbers is 8. So we didn't have a whole lot of opposition. The problem was that we had some key opposition. The Speaker of the House and the House Majority Leader opposed the bill. And I don't think that's necessarily why the bill failed. I think it failed because we ran out of time in the Senate and was not able to do what we needed to do to get it to the Senate floor. But in that opposition, in that stated opposition, I find some irony. And the only thing that was ever told to me in terms of the opposition for the bill, particularly after we put that cap, and I hope you noticed Heather's face when she talked about the cap. She still does not like the cap. Okay? And I hope she never does, because I think, as we all know, any kind of legislation, you never walk away with everything. Okay? You always walk in knowing that there's going to be some concessions along that way. And we had that discussion as a committee very early before we took it to the legislature and said, okay, what happens if, and I asked the group this, I said, what happens if they like the process part of the bill that creates a process to determine factual innocence, but they really have a lot of heartburn about the compensation? Do we bifurcate it? Do we separate it? Do we try and run 2 separate bills? Are we willing this first year, are we willing to move forward with half the bill? Okay. As for me, as a legislative sponsor, I've always felt that I'm the puppet. These were the puppet masters. Okay. Particularly Heather. Now she downplayed her role a little bit, but come on. Know that she was the puppet master. Okay. And I felt it was important for me to make sure that I was doing the bidding of this entire group. And the determination was made up front that we would not do one without the other. That if the bill failed because of the compensation piece, that's okay, we'll come back the next year. But we would not allow it to move forward one without the other. So a very important statement from the beginning. Now the opposition, I argue the importance of this lies in bringing integrity to the system. It's about restoring integrity in the criminal justice system. That to me is a critical element of this bill. Ironically, that was the stated opposition of one of the key legislators. That he felt by setting this in policy, we were saying that we don't believe, that we're saying in policy that we don't believe that there is any integrity in the system. And we can't possibly make that the policy of this state. That value that we don't believe in the integrity of that which we're a part of. And so it was kind of an ironic twist of why I was saying, yeah, that's why we need the bill, to restore that integrity. That was really beyond the compensation piece and some of the lack of understanding. And I'll tell you that they really took over my office for about, I think 2 weeks or so. And the fact that we had 64 votes? 64, the fact that we had 64 yes votes was really an attribute to all of their hard work, because they pulled just about every individual legislator out of that chamber and spoke to them about the bill and educated. And I always joke about, because I'm a part of it, and it's fun to poke fun at legislators and some of the decisions that we make. Trust me, I'm the first one to do that sometimes. But the things that people need to realize is that some of us are farmers, and we're trying to make a determination on something that's legally, technically legal, like this piece of legislation was. Some of us are if they start talking to me about water, my eyes get glazed over. But I'll tell you, water is probably the most passionate issue up there. Okay? So I think what people don't realize is there's a lot of effort that goes in and is needed in terms of educating legislators when you're working on whatever that legislation may be. And this is by no means any different. And so the credit really goes to the individuals sitting over here that we're doing all the hard work and pulling people out of the chambers and chatting with them and educating and saying, no, $2,000, that's really what they wanted to do, like $2,000 for 2 years. $2,000 for 2 years is not going to do anything, and this is why. This is why we need a consistent, fiscally sound, fiscally responsible policy to address the integrity of the system, or to address the gaps in that person's life. So this, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the politics of the legislation, because the strategy and the thought that goes into it is the stuff that really is where I get the most joy. And I just want to say lastly is that, because his name didn't come up, but the other legislator that really was on the ball at the very beginning was Representative Larry Wiley. And I think I just probably emailed Heather back like a day before, or quite possibly would be Representative Wiley who would be standing here before you. He is equally passionate about this issue. So thank you very much. I look forward to any questions.